All right, welcome back to this week's edition of Queen City Reds, episode 14. As always, if you're here, comment, like, share, do all the fun stuff. We appreciate you as always. Back with Paul this week. It's been a while since Paul's been on. Paul, how are the vibes? How are things going?
They're going. Nice shirt. Just realized we have the same one on, so
I saw that too when you logged on. I was like, this is perfect. This is perfect. Hopefully, we're in unison on our thoughts about David Bell as well.
yeah.
Obviously, David Bell fired last night. Out of nowhere, honestly. I thought, with just the way this ownership and management um, has been, I thought they'd give him, another year. I didn't think they're
Mhm.
not usually one to fire a guy that's under contract. They gave Brian Price plenty of extra years, it seemed like. Dusty Baker, they didn't. The fans kind of ran Dusty Baker out of town when he was winning. But I'll let you go first. What are your kind of thoughts? What were your thoughts when you heard the news last night, and just your thoughts in general about David Bell no longer being manager of the Reds?
Yeah, I mean, definitely surprised. Like you said, I was kind of, obviously thoughts were there of will they fire him in the off season? Kind of was leaning with you on probably not just because of the history of they extended him last year, probably giving him another chance, but also wouldn't have been surprised if they did. I will say I was very surprised at the timing of it. There's what, 5 games left or something. Um, and to
Yeah,
just fire the coach then. But, like Krall said today, kind of get ahead of the game, which makes sense. Um, I I don't know. Like I think it's probably the right move. Um, he's been there this is his sixth season, right? Or fifth.
I
Um,
think sixth, I believe.
Sixth. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's his sixth. And they've made the playoffs one time. Um, and obviously, I think part of me, and I think you'd probably agree with it, leading up to this year too, is like how much of that was really on him, especially those first couple of years. And then after the 2020 season, only was dealing with what he had, but um, when the young guys aren't performing like they thought they would, somebody's got to be the scapegoat for it. It's always the manager. So I'm not necessarily surprised by the move overall that they decided to go with him. Get rid of him.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look back at the some of the years he had, that you had the 2020 year where he had probably a pretty good team. And you dealt with the COVID year. The Reds obviously made the playoffs and didn't score a run. Um, that was disappointing, but you're right. I mean, if you look at the over under that Vegas puts out every year on all the teams he's probably had one or two teams that have been projected to go over 500. So some of those years, like 2022 was a wash. I honestly think his best managerial job was last year when he took a team that was projected to win
Hmm.
60 some games and won, 82. I think he did a really good job with that team. Now, you know, this a lot of the same players were back this year and regressed. Which was disappointing. CS obviously was hurt most of the year, but he was not looking very good. Will Benson had a terrible year. Ellie obviously did well. And again, I don't know what to blame on a manager and what not to blame on a manager, but he's the head of the team, so you're going to get the blame whether you like it or
Right.
not. I think one thing that I go back to, and I go back and forth because you can find examples where a guy like Craig Counsell comes in and he's this great manager for the Brewers and he goes over to the Cubs and the Cubs are bad this year.
Hmm.
And the Brewers continue to be great this year and you're
Yeah.
going to win the division. So in a time like that, you're saying how much does the manager actually matter? Is it more of how the organization is? But then you take a guy last year, like Bruce Bochy, goes and manages the Rangers, and all of a sudden the Rangers are in the World Series.
Mhm. Yeah.
So you can find examples of both, but I'm one. I think I've said this before. I don't think the manager matters as much as people think it does.
Yeah.
I think it matters. Um, but at the same time, like I don't know. I just don't know how much that it matters. It's hard, and they're always going to be the scapegoat. And I will say, I mean, in terms of Reds fandom, the fans were over David Bell, and I think a lot of that was you get into the press conference and you'd see well, we lost today, and he'd sound like Bill Belichick behind the mic, and he'd say, "I lost today," and we still got a lot of season left of us. There's 6 games left in the season, but we think we can make the playoffs still. And we're like, David, you're mathematically eliminated. The season is over. Stop with the glass half full stuff. But at the same time, like you don't hire a manager just on his press conference answers. So I
No.
know fans are upset about that, and they are upset about how he talks to the media, and they think he didn't have any accountability just because he didn't throw his players under the bus publicly. But I don't necessarily think that's completely true. Um, but that's kind of where I stand with it. Going off of that, get into some of Nick Krall's comments today. So the one comment that stuck out to me was where, let me pull it up here. Somebody had said it. So he kind of said him and David Krall and David Bell's had some
Mm,
philosophical differences. Um,
yep.
and he mentioned a couple of examples. Which before I get into this, I put this on X. There was a somebody one of the media members at the press conference brought it up and kind of said, "Well, what were those philosophical? I can't even say the word.
Philosophical.
Philosophical differences." And wow. And Krall kind of said, I'm not going to get into those. And the media member pushed back, and I don't know who it was, otherwise I'd shout them out, and said, well, don't we deserve like a little bit of transparency after how everything's been the last 30 years? And Krall kind of said, well, there's specific examples, and he gave an answer. He pointed out some of the defense. He pointed out some of the base running things.
Mm,
And I just wanted to say I thought that was really good of that media member. But instead of just letting him say
right.
we're not going to talk about it, he pushed him on it. I think the Reds aren't a big market, and you don't get tough questions sometimes. Some of these, I'm not saying reporting is an easy job or asking questions, but some of the times the questions they ask David Bell are just like fluff questions,
Yeah.
or Nick Krall, just fluff answers, and they weren't today. So I appreciate that. But I thought that stuck out as we watched this team this year and saw base running mistakes. And yeah, you can point to there were a lot of great base running things, and they were just aggressive. But the defensive mistakes or blunders of where it seemed like sometimes guys were kind of lackadaisical and not just
Mhm.
kind of going through the motions from time to time. Like that falls on the manager, and I think that's what when fans saw that, and then you tie that in with you're not winning, that kind of falls on the manager. And then after the game, you said, "Oh well, they're trying their best out there." Like it's just so many things adding up, and it kind of all makes sense. But that's the biggest quote to me that stuck out. To
Yeah.
what Nick Krall said, I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. On top of that, I on with the specific examples kind of stuff. I remember he mentioned uh one run games.
Yep.
I think that probably falls on the manager quite a bit as well. That is where, obviously the players have to do their job, but the manager is the one putting them in the position and in those kinds of positions late in the game. He's making those decisions. And also, he talked about the run differential. Obviously, the Reds blew out some teams, but also they got blown out several games. So I think having a positive run differential and being under 500, that's probably on the manager too in the long run. I don't know how much, but I think with Krall, people and kind of with Bell too, I think Reds fans and honestly Ohio sports in general are always very quick to get rid of. Like, for example, right now, I'm not saying I disagree or agree necessarily, but the Browns fans want to get rid of Deshaun Watson, but they've been getting rid of quarterbacks forever. It's kind of like the Reds. I mean, David Bell has coached the most games besides Dusty Baker since Sparky Anderson for the Reds. And, you know, that's in our lifetime. He's our, besides Dusty, basically the same amount of time as Dusty, and that with no success. So the quickness to get rid of him or the people wanting to get rid of Krall right now, too, I don't agree with that. I think Krall has done some pretty good things. Um, I think that he does have a tough job being in a small market, but also that's what they hired him for. Um, and I think going into the manager search, I think personally think they need to figure out what those philosophical differences were and make sure that the next guy doesn't have those, um, because I think they should have known that kind of thing ahead of time. But
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one run, I go back and forth on the one run game thing because like I say, okay, if you're down 7-2 and then you score 4 runs in the ninth, like, okay, is that,
right,
you know, does David Bell get credit for that for a 1 run loss? There's some
right,
just fluky things that go on there sometimes, but at the same time, when you think about where the Reds struggled, defense and base running and
Mhm.
some things like that, like those can tie into 1 run.
Yeah,
Um, but then you look at something like last year where they were so good in 1 run games. So
yeah,
do you say David Bell was awesome last year and then sucked
right.
this year? It's hard. There's not an exact answer to it. But those are the questions and those are the things. Again, managers sign up for that thing and they're going to get the blame, whether right or wrong. So it's an interesting thing. One thing before, and I don't know if you got the chance to see him yet, but Tyler Stevenson was interviewed. I'm not sure if
Mm.
you saw Charlie
No, I didn't.
Goldsmith said. Let me find out I'll just read him here. Um, but they said Tyler Stevenson just met with the media. He thanked David Bell for having a big impact on his career and said there are a lot of emotions today. Stevenson said there was accountability with the previous staff, meaning David Bell's staff. He said a new manager could bring a fresh vibe and said, we've got the pieces, we've got the talent. And then he went on to say, Tyler Stevenson, when asked what he'd want to see from the next manager, somebody that can come in and make an impact. We all want to win. That's the biggest thing, the ability to win, be a part of a playoffs, and bring something special to Cincinnati. Whoever that is, we'll find out when that person is hired, someone that can steer the ship. I
Hmm.
don't think anything crazy stands out there. I mean,
No.
a player most likely isn't going to throw the old manager under the bus. Um, but I do think kind of what Nick Krall seemed to say and Tyler Stevenson seemed to say is, excuse me, the Reds had the talent, it feels like. I'm sure there were a lot of injuries. But again, like you said, I think some of that falls on Nick Krall. He has to be able to get the depth
Yeah.
to deal with those injuries and make moves to deal with those injuries because Reds fans are tired of just hearing, oh, injuries, the season's shot again because of injury luck. So I think everybody's aligned that the talent is there. Yeah, obviously you got to make moves. The Reds need probably a big outfield bat. They probably
Mhm.
should not go into next year with Luke Maley being the backup catcher. So there's ways to improve the team. You probably need Jamie Candelario to play better consistently than he did this year. And you need Noelvi Marte to play better. You
Yep.
need the guys that are injured, like Matt McLean, to play. You can't just say everything has to be perfect for this team to win, and that's what it seemed like this year. But anything on those Stevenson comments that stick out or anything,
Not
yeah,
really. Pretty, especially coming from him, I wouldn't expect him, especially him, to put David Bell under the bus. He's not, doesn't seem like that kind of guy at all. Um, and like from a player's perspective, like him saying, we have the talent, they all know it. So just somebody to bring in to give him that boost. I do find it interesting that he said, almost kind of said experience in the playoffs a little bit. Um, that's an interesting take because I would agree that would be very nice if they were able to get somebody brought in that has experience winning. Um, but obviously that's choices are limited sometimes, but I do find that interesting that he, maybe like a winning culture type thing. I don't know what, I'm not trying to speculate that he was hinting on that or anything, but it's always fun to kind of think about that stuff, what he might be trying to say.
yeah, absolutely. Well, going into that, we'll sort of transition into. Is there anyone that sticks out to you, or anyone that anything specifically you're looking for, in the next Reds or as the next Reds
Um,
manager?
I don't know how to pronounce his name, but I really like how do you pronounce the Mariners coach that got fired? How do you
It's
pronounce his name?
Scott Service, I believe.
Service. Okay. I wasn't sure how to say his last name, but I like him. Obviously he got fired this year, because they went on a 10 game, they lost their 10 game lead or whatever. Um, yeah, that sucks, but he's did a pretty good job with a team that, in my opinion, beside offensively was not very good. Didn't have a ton of talent offensively on that team. Um, so I think that would be a good option. Obviously, what's his name? Shoemaker. Um, or yeah,
Yep.
he would be
Skip
a good
Shoemaker.
option. I I'm not sure that the Reds will be able to get him though, because he's pretty much gonna have his pick. Because I think several teams are probably gonna um go after him. Especially, I think his contract ends after this season, so I think he's basically gonna have a pick of where he goes. But you never know, you know. I'm not sure. It's hard to,
Yeah.
like who do you like? Who do you like?
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's not baseball's so different than like sports like
Right.
basketball or football where you're like, I want this guy because they run the hurry up
Hmm.
offense, or I want this guy because he runs the 3-3-5 defense, or I want this
Right.
guy because they play up tempo on, do a lot of fast break, or they play zone.
Yeah.
Like baseball, like yeah, you can say this guy plays small ball a little bit more. This guy lets the starter go deeper in the games, but I don't know how you really know that unless you're locked into all the what they're doing. But I'm actually with you. I actually like Scott Service from the Mariners. I mean, before this year, the last 3 years, they were 90 and 72, 90 and 72, 88 and 74. He's got a winning record over his 9 seasons there. He's got he's been in the playoffs. Again, he got fired because basically the team just stopped hitting this year, which the Reds can relate to.
Yeah.
But he's got experience. I think the Schumacher thing's interesting. I don't honestly I don't know what people love about him so much. I mean, he was manager of the year last year, which great, cool. But this year I mean the Marlins have been bad, but
Yeah.
I think they were projected to win more games than the Reds at the beginning of the year. Now, obviously, they got rid of a lot of those guys and they've had injuries. But it seems like he's just very hyped up, like the
Yeah.
one, and I don't know that he's proven anything besides having one good year. I don't think I would be opposed to it. I don't think I'd hate it or anything, but I think he's a little overhyped. But I think for me, I would love Aaron Boone, honestly.
Oh yeah.
If the Yankees were to fire Aaron Boone, I would be all about Aaron Boone. Um, Going for him to come somewhere where it's not the crazy New York media. Obviously a
Mhm.
former Red. But I think I want somebody with experience. I want someone with experience. I think they need to go outside of the organization.
I agree.
I
I meant to say that was I definitely got to go outside the organization, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, it feels like they need somebody fresh.
yeah.
They need someone fresh. They need someone to come in and, just lead the team. And it's got to be, it can't be someone like, Derek Johnson or Pat Kelly, who's the bats manager,
Right.
or even Freddie Benavides. Like, get someone who hasn't been in the clubhouse, hasn't been in the dugout.
I
And
think
I
Boone.
think, what's that?
I think Boone would add a really good burst of energy from the manager spot that the Reds have not had necessarily.
Yeah, and it's
I
just the only
think
thing with that is you're banking on, first of all, you'd have to wait a while because we're waiting for
right,
the playoffs, and then you're banking on basically a first round exit because if the
right,
Yankees do anything in the playoffs, they're not going to fire him.
yeah,
So it's just a weird, yeah, it's
right,
weird. I don't know. I use like if my football team gets fired, I have a list of like a million guys that I'm like, I want to
yeah,
watch my team run the hurry up offense, or I want
right.
my team to have a defense again. But baseball's weird. There's a lot of guys that I know nothing about, like some bench coaches were mentioned.
Hmm.
And I'm like, I honestly don't know a ton about them. I don't know if the Reds want to go with a first year manager route again. They went down that route with Brian Price and David Bell, and it hasn't seemed to work out. So I would be surprised if they didn't go with a guy that has some experience. I think someone like Terry Francona would be cool. Um, you could say he's a little bit more old school and his policies got a little bit dated towards his time with the Guardians. But again, I think the Reds may need something like that now.
Yeah,
If you could get him out of retirement. So I don't know. Again, my biggest thing is I'd say experience, a guy with
yeah,
experience who's been a manager before and somebody who is is outside of the organization. I don't think
yeah.
they need to promote within. I don't think they will. But those are my kind of thoughts.
What are your thoughts on Barry Larkin?
I love Barry Larkin. And I don't want to say I'm going to judge him based on things he said in the booth because maybe that's not fair, but some of the things he says in the booth are crazy. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't think I don't want to I think that here's where I stand on Barry. I don't want to dislike Barry Larkin
right.
because of how he manages. Like Barry Larkin's one of my favorite players, Reds player, and like if things go wrong, people are just going to hate Barry Larkin, and that doesn't
Yeah.
seem fun. And one more thing I'll say on that, I'm glad you brought it up because I put this tweet out there today too. The If you go down Reds Twitter, and maybe this isn't all fans, so to be fair to some fans, but if you go down Reds Twitter, it's like, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to hire Barry Larkin as the manager. We're going to hire Joey Votto as the batting
Yeah.
coach. And we're going to, I don't know, maybe we'll hire Bronson Arroyo or Johnny Cueto as the pitching coach. It's like, guys, can we take a step back? Like, just
Yeah.
because these guys were good players, first of all, doesn't mean they want to coach. Second of all, it doesn't mean they're going to be a good coach. Tiger Woods would probably be an awful golf coach. Michael Jordan was one of the worst executives in NBA
Yeah.
history. He was
Great
the best
example.
basketball player on the planet. He was awful in getting players like in the front office.
Yeah.
And like it just again, Joey Votto, I don't think has any interest in coaching. I think he
No.
wants to be far away from baseball and just do his own thing. But it just is crazy to me. People's like, all right, here we go. Let's just pick up the best players in Reds history, and we're just going to stack them on the coaching staff. And I'm like, this is not how it works. Like that's not.
I'm glad you said this.
But anyway, that's why I went on a
Yeah.
little tangent there. But you said Barry Larkin, and that's
Yeah.
honestly how I feel. I don't want to dislike him because he does a bad job. Now, maybe if he were to get hired and he'd do a great job, I'd be all about it. But I don't know. I would not that he would not be on my first probably five picks to be the next manager.
Same. I'm right there with you.
So, all right. Well, with that last topic here, kind of along the same lines. I think the Reds did. They fired their infield coach slash game planning manager or something, which was
Yeah.
kind of an interesting move. I don't know what that guy did to be the only coach that's
Yeah,
fired from the
seriously.
NFL. I mean, I don't know. Like it's pretty interesting. I was kind of thinking of that today. I'm like, what did this guy do? Was he just David Bell's right hand man? And they're like, hey, every assistant gets to keep their staff or keeps their job for the next 5 days besides this guy. He's out of here. So that was pretty interesting. I have no idea the
Yeah.
context or anything of that, but that was odd. But Derek Johnson. They were asked about Derek Johnson. For those of you who don't know, he's the pitching game coordinator. I think is his official title. Basic pitching coach. He basically oversees all the Reds pitching over the major league staff and the minor league staff. Derek Johnson's a guy that is looked very highly upon in the profession. I think obviously the Reds pitching was really good this year. And they weren't great last year. It's funny though. You hear just talking about managers and coaches and should they be fired last year when the Reds pitching struggled, everybody was all over Derek Johnson. This year, you don't hear a
Hmm.
peep about Derek Johnson because the Reds
Nope.
pitching staff did great. So again, sometimes these coaches and managers get unfairly, treated,
Yep.
and it's not their fault. It ultimately comes down to players performing. But Derek Johnson, from what Krall said, it seems like he's pretty much going to stay. He said he's under contract and he's going to go forward. I'm guessing there's a way that if the Reds were to hire a new manager and the new manager said, I'm only coming if I get to hire all my new staff and they really wanted that guy, there's maybe a way that they would say, hey, we're going to go a different direction. But based on Krall's comments today, it sounds like they want to keep him. And I'm all for it. I think Derek Johnson's done a good
Yeah.
job. And, I think certain guys are just good in positions. Like Brian Price was a great pitching coach. And then we made
Hmm.
him manager and he was not a good manager. So, but any thoughts on Derek Johnson just overall? And would you like to see him stay or would you like to see the Reds go in a different direction?
I definitely think he should stay. I mean, exhibit number one is Hunter Green's progression from last year to this year. I also will say I know earlier in the year, Frankie Montas made comments about Derek Johnson that were very positive. I don't remember exactly what they were. Just, I think it might have even been when he was traded, just about development and how he taught him to be a leader with the younger guys a little bit. Um, but I think what Derek Johnson's done with the pitching staff starting rotation and look at, I mean, the bullpen is kind of a bunch of guys that are just kind of thrown together who have turned out to be really, really good. Um,
Yeah,
so
even in
I,
September, the Reds are like 12-8 in September or something.
right.
And you have guys starting Julian Aguiar, Nick Martinez, Jacob Junis, Rhett Lauder. Like
Yeah,
these guys are somehow just going out there and throwing gems. And you would again, maybe it's some coaching, maybe it's just guys performing. That's where you don't know whether to credit or
right.
blame, but you'd have to think some of it's due to Derek Johnson and what he's done
Yeah.
with the staff because it's been consistent. So, but one more thing I just thought of on that, and that this just I know we keep talking about it, but it's just so interesting to me because when you think of the rest of the staff, like hitting coaches and bench coaches and first base coach and third base coach, like I'm gonna bring up the hitting coach example.
Yeah.
I don't even remember who our hitting coach.
I was gonna say, do you
I
know
want
who
to
it
say
is?
it's
Because
like
I don't.
Alan something. I'm gonna look it up here in a second and just keep rambling while I'm looking it up. Oh, Joel McCathan, that's right, Joel
Oh
McCathan,
yeah,
McCathan,
I remember.
McCathan.
Yeah.
I don't know how you say, and he was the Reds hitting coach last year. And this kind of goes along, I guess, with Carl's comments. So you bring up Noelvi Marte last year, you bring up CS, you bring up Ellie. Um, Ellie does great for a month. He struggles the rest of the year. CS does pretty well. Matt McClain does awesome. Noelvi Marte does great. So you're getting like, okay, who gets the credit for this? The Reds hitting coach. He must be awesome. This year, the Reds had so many guys regress.
Yeah.
CS bad when he was healthy. Ellie was great, so Ellie didn't regress. But you had guys like Jake Fraley not play as good. Will Benson bad. And it's Noelvi Marte really struggled.
Yeah.
So it's like it's just I don't know what to do with that. And it's like I guess that's where I kind of get like someone's to blame. If things are going well, it's kind of like if you don't hear your name, you're doing a good job. The
Yeah.
second things go badly, it's like it's the coach's fault. And I don't know if that's 100% true. I kind of think like players have to be better. Now I do think like coaches' jobs are to make those players better and
Right.
but also you're trying to teach major league players who guys are 24 to 30 years old. It's not like, coaching a kid that's 9 years old that has all this untapped potential. At some point, you reach your peak. So it's just an interesting conversation when it comes
Agreed.
to like where guys get credit for and where they get the blame for.
And I think it baseball really lends itself to this, and it goes back to like what have how you said, thinking of attributes of a coach you want. It's just so different with baseball than any other sport because it's hard to actually point out like, okay, the coach really made an impact there, or it's not like, oh, we went for it on 4th and 1. No, like you decided to put a pitcher in the 8th inning. Did that decide the game? Maybe. Did it not? Maybe. But then did it decide the other 161 games? No. I think it's like this conversation is very like hard to think of like pinpoint reasons why. Like, but
And it's one
I
of those,
think,
just to jump in on that, it's one of those like if David Bell makes a move in the eighth and it works out,
yeah,
people don't say a peep. You only
no,
hear about it when they bring a move in and it didn't work out. So it
right,
just goes down the road of like, whereas like football, I feel like Dan Campbell went for a million fourth downs last year, and you
yeah, I
heard
did.
about it. Like they worked, and people were saying Dan Campbell goes for it on fourth down. Nobody praises the bullpen moves when they work. It's just a different sport. It's just a different
Right.
sport. It's just an interesting, yeah,
Yeah,
it's just an interesting conversation.
it is. Um, I just looked it up. So betonline.ag, for those who don't know, is a gambling website. They have the numbers up, and Skip Schumacher is the favorite at plus 200 to be the Reds coach right now.
Go through the top. Let's say top 10 real quick,
Top
and I want
10.
to know that.
Okay. So we got Schumacher at 200, and then we go down to Francona at 700. Pat Kelly is plus 800. David Ross is 900. Benavides is 900. Derek Johnson is 1200. And then Aaron Boone is 1600. Don Mattingly is 1600. And Brad Ausmus is 1800. I think that's 10.
Nice. There you go.
Yeah.
There's a pretty
Oh,
much all.
sorry, I didn't see the side by side here. Hold on. Let me do a couple more because I thought it went. So there's some people ahead of like Freddie Benavides. So Will Venable is plus 600, and Barry is plus 800, and Service is plus 900, and so is Gabe Kapler is plus
Okay.
900 as
Yeah,
well.
so all names that have been floated out there. I've heard a lot about
Yeah.
Venable, and he's someone I honestly don't know a ton about.
Who
Um,
is that?
I think he's like the Rangers bench coach, if I remember correctly. Which
Okay.
again, I just don't know. I'm not very good uh with keeping up with teams that aren't the Reds. Yeah, associate manager for the Texas Rangers.
Okay.
So again, you're taking a team that went to the World Series and he's up and coming. He's only 41 years old. So I do like, it's funny. I do like, as much as I say I like experience, like I like the young coach who can relate to guys. But again, I just don't think after the Brian Price and David Bell experiment
Yeah.
that you just keep going back to that well and try to get the new guy that you hope works out. It feels just much more safer to get somebody who's been there, done that
Yep.
um, before. And I'm probably if when David Bell was hired, I probably was complete opposite of that, and I probably would have said,
Hmm.
"Don't go get somebody that um, some old head."
Right.
But now I'm like, I don't know. We've seen the experiment of first time manager and it hasn't worked out. And just
Yep.
go get somebody that's proven. So
Yeah. I think that's where I think like going when you're in a small market on a small market team to get a coach with experience puts you a leg up, in my opinion. You're already dealing with guys that aren't maybe as good, so having somebody that has experience in the game probably helps quite a bit. At least you would think.
yeah,
I don't know.
absolutely. Well, that's it for this episode of Queen City Reds. Paul, appreciate you always as joining.
Thank you, sir.
Um, like I said, if you guys made it this far, like, comment, subscribe, do all the things. I'm sure we'll have plenty more episodes talking about when there's reports in the news of who the Reds might hire, when the Reds hire somebody. We'll probably hop on here. But other than that, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Go Reds.
Go Reds.